Thank you. Um, so there's a whole world behind a Qlik application. And it could be that you have a data warehouse yourself. It might be that you collect and manipulate data in other ways. It could also be that you use Qlik to extract and transform data from QVDs to other QVDs before it ends up in a certain application. Um, and and that can become pretty complex. Um, and whenever Qlik implementations are successful, and I've managed a few myself, then you run into certain issues. Um, it might be that the development process becomes inefficient because you have so many apps, so many data flows, and you've got question, hey, I make a change here, what is the impact of that change? Or I make a change, but I made a mistake. How do I repair this? Um, so you want to have some kind of source control, and I already saw that 50% of the audience said, we do manual source control, maybe copying apps. And that creates other problems with, of course, having a cluttered environment. And then when organizations go from a real dev to a real production environment and not deploying through streams, but really in different environments, you get into a deployment process that can be very cumbersome. Now, if Qlik implementations is very successful, you have external parties facing Qlik applications. You probably get audit requirements as well, and we see that a lot. What changes did you make? Were these changes authorized? Who made those changes? And in order to answer that question, you have to do a lot of manual work again. So, and that's not the only thing. You also want to capture knowledge of who has done what, when, and why, especially when you have external contractors that do certain things and they leave the organization again. Why did they make this change? What exactly did they do? So there are different reasons to say, hey, I want to streamline that whole development process. I want to have more insight of what's going on. And from a managerial perspective, I want to know all the changes that have been made so that I can manage this process. And then zero touch version control comes in place because you want to create an efficient process, which means that you want Qlik to be versioned at the lowest level possible to know what's going on. And that could be through seamless integration so that there's no shell on top of Qlik Sense, but through the backend, everything is done automatically, even you don't know that that is happening, right? So what we will show in the demo that we have a high granularity of change controls of individual apps, of individual objects within the apps, and that you can restore them and deploy them. Okay. And then, of course, you want to have analytics over your development process because we are BI specialists. We want to know what is going on, what changes did we make, and we want to be able to report on that as well. So BI over BI can be very essential, important, because you want to apply the same principles. Okay. So basically, if you want to influence the speed and the cost of the Qlik implementation and the delivery of Qlik, it's about, of course, the people that have experts, that have skills and are experts to deliver. We want to have processes in place, controls in place to make sure that we only apply the changes that we need to apply, but also the technology that can help us to make this process efficient. Okay, and we see good results when people implement automated version control because that gives people the confidence that changes are being tracked and also that they can make mistakes and that they can try things out, and that if they make a mistake they don't have to make a copy before, they can always roll back. And like Chirac told us, one of our customers, that led to innovations because people can make decisions to try something, and if it's not good they just roll it back. Okay, so this is an introduction what I want to give to version control, why it's important, and why I think that having that in place leads to not only efficiency but also to innovations. So let's have a look and let's hand it over to Luc Wade.
So today we're going to talk about version control and a little bit of deployment for Qlik Sense using Soterre, which is a Motio product. And I like to start these demos off in my Qlik Sense development environment, just so you have an idea of what we're working with here. I can tell you that my secretary in the back is excited to be on with some fellow Europeans this morning. So let's get started here. As you can see, I am in my data analysis stream, and we are going to use this fleet surplus auction app for the purposes of this demonstration. So I will quickly open this app up and give you an idea of what the app contains. When this loads, you'll see that this app contains the objects that you would expect. We have 3 sheets, 5 bookmarks, and a story. I apologize that my Qlik Sense environment is running a little bit slow right now. It may have just rolled out of bed as well. So here we see our 3 sheets, our 5 bookmarks, and our story. And I will quickly click through these sheets just so that you can see that everything is working as expected. So now I'm going to switch over to Soterre, which is our version control and deployment solution for Qlik Sense. And if I do so, I'm already logged in. This is the home page. And when I click on this Explore button here, a panel will slide out that displays all of the various Qlik Sense environments that I have connected to this installation of Soterre. And we just looked in my development environment. So if I click on development, we see all of the different QMC objects that Soterre has under version control. And anything that you see in any of these menus can be deployed from one Qlik Sense environment to another. So we are versioning all of your data connections, all of your analytic connections, your Qlik tags, custom properties, and extensions. And an exciting new update that we made to the product about 3 weeks ago is that we are now versioning your personal work apps and content as well. So if I click on personal work, in this environment, you can see that I have several users, and we are versioning the personal work apps for those users. If we back out here and take a look at the published apps in this environment, and we navigate to this data analysis stream, we see the 3 apps in my data analysis stream in my development environment. And the app that we just looked at is this Fleet Surplus Auction app. And this is where things start to get a little bit more exciting with Soterre. So if I click on Fleet Surplus Auction, you'll see that in Soterre, we split out all of the app's objects into individual groupings. And that essentially makes them first-class citizens and gives you a lot of flexibility and control over not only versioning, but deployment as well. So for example, we have all 3 sheets under version control, your stories, your bookmarks. We also version private and community objects for published apps. And so you'll see folders there in the places that you would expect. If I double click on the app itself, that will take me to a properties screen that displays the properties associated with the current published version of this app. We have a change history tab that shows all of the earlier versions of this app as well. So now I'm going to go back into my Qlik Sense development environment. I am going to duplicate this app to my personal work area. And once it's there, I'm going to make the 3 classic types of changes. I am going to delete something, create something new, and make an edit. So I have this app in my personal work area. If I open it up, I will start off by deleting a sheet, and I'll delete this regional fleets sheet, a little bit of a tongue twister there. And now I need to create something new. So I'll open up the equipment data sheet, make a selection, and create a new bookmark. And so we have this new demo bookmark at the bottom down here. And lastly, I need to edit something about this app. And so to do that, I'm going to open up the data load editor. And what you'll notice here is that the load script for this app contains two duplicate sets of variables. I am going to delete off the second set of duplicates. That's not going to have any functional impact on the data being loaded into this app, but Soterre will still pick up the change that I'm making. So we will reload the data here, and once that is successful, I am going to republish this app. And I will replace the existing version with this new version that we just created. Once this job completes, we will open the app up in my data analysis stream just to make sure that my changes have been passed on. So we now expect to see only 2 sheets. And we expect to see that new demo bookmark as well. So we have just 2 sheets now. If I take a look at my bookmarks, we see that new bookmark at the bottom. So now let's switch back to Soterre and take a look at how Soterre has recorded those changes. So if I go back into Soterre, and we'll start from the top here, every Qlik Sense environment has a very handy feature called the timeline. So for my development environment where we just made those changes, if I open the timeline, we see at the top the 3 changes that I made. I created this new demo bookmark, I changed something about the app, and I deleted that regional fleet sheet. If we want to dig a little bit deeper and see what I changed about the app, I can click on this row and click the Compare to Previous Version button. And we see that I didn't change any properties of this app, but if I go to the load script, shaded in gray, we see that duplicate set of variables that was removed. And so now I'd like you to imagine that a month or 2 goes by and a user comes to me and says, "Hey, Luke, what happened to that regional fleet sheet? I don't use it very often, but that sheet was very important to me." It's very possible that in that time span, a lot of work has been done in this app. And so in an ideal world, I would like to recover that sheet without impacting any other component of the app. And Soterre allows you to do exactly that. So if I want to recover that deleted sheet without impacting the other changes that I've made, then I will open up the change history for this regional fleet sheet. At the top here, we have a record of when the sheet was deleted. And if I'd like to recover just this sheet instead of rolling the entire app back, then I will select the previous version and click the Restore button. And that's all that I have to do. So Soterre is now recovering my regional fleets sheet. We can view that here. We are restoring version 11 of this sheet. And that will take about 10 seconds or so to run. And while that finishes up, I'd like to point out that you can also comment on these different versions. As you can imagine, this list can grow pretty long, pretty rapidly, because we are actively versioning your apps. So as soon as an app is published or republished with a change, Soterre is automatically picking up a new version of that app, as well as any individual objects that exist in that app. So if I want to comment on version 12 here, I can type, "This was deleted by accident." And we now have a comment associated with this version, as well as a date and time that that comment was made and the user that made that comment. If I navigate to the deployment history tab, we see at the top here that that recovery job has finished. We recovered version 11, and that created version 13. So versions 13 and 11 are identical, but we want a record of that recovery. So if I go to the change history once again and refresh this interface, we see that new version at the top indicating that the sheet has been restored. If I go back into my development environment and open up the Fleet Surplus Auction app one last time, we will see that the regional fleet sheet is back. Everything works as expected. including the new bookmark that I made just a few minutes ago, which is this demo bookmark. So that's how version control works in Soterre. One thing that I'd like to point out in addition is that those individual components can be deployed across environments as well. You don't have to deploy an entire app with Soterre. You can pick and choose what you deploy. So the last thing that I'd like to show here is how that deployment process works. And to do so, we are going to deploy this new version of the Fleet Surplus Auction app from my development environment to my testing environment. I am already logged into my testing environment, and what you'll notice is I'm now here in my testing environment. This environment is essentially identical to my development environment, except it does not contain that Fleet Surplus Auction app. So if I want to carry this deployment out, I will go back into Soterre, navigate to my Fleet Surplus Auction app. I can run the deployment from this pop-out menu here. I can also deploy from this main properties interface. And if I'd like to deploy an earlier version, I can do so by selecting that version and clicking the deploy button here. But for this demonstration, we're just going to deploy the currently published version of this app. So on the properties tab, I will click the deploy button. We want to deploy from development to testing. When I click next, this will take me to a deployment preview where we see at the top that we are deploying the Fleet Surplus Auction app with an asterisk, which indicates that we are including descendants. We're including all of the individual components of the app, and we can see those by clicking the preview deployment button here. And we see a full list of all of the objects that make up this app that will be deployed to my testing environment. So the preview looks good. I will click next and click next again. The last screen in this wizard is the execution mode. I can save this job and kick it off later in Soterre or via REST API call. I could schedule this job to run later on, but we are just going to run this job right now. I'll click finish, and that's all that I have to do. So my app is now being deployed from my development environment to my testing environment. And we can take a look at the items that we're deploying by clicking this view link. We see that we are deploying the app along with all of its components. And we will give this job about 10 or 15 more seconds to run here. And then we'll take a look at the app in my testing environment. And that is all that I will be showing today. So if I go to the deployment history tab here, we see that this job is still running. This will finish up very shortly. And we will take a look. One additional functionality that I'll speak to just for a moment while this finishes up is that you also have the ability to undo these deployments, which we will see in just a moment. And by doing so, that will restore everything in my target environment to exactly the way that things were before I carried this deployment out. So we see that this job has now finished. We deployed version 11 of the app from my development environment, which created version 1 in my testing environment because the app did not exist. If I wanted to undo the deployment, I can do so here. And if I want to take a look at everything that was deployed over, I can view this deployment. And we have a side-by-side look of every version of every object in my source development environment and the version that that created in my target environment. If I go into my testing environment, that app has now been deployed. So if I click away and click back, we see that the app has arrived here and everything works as expected.